Are you part of a remote working team? You need Remotion. This is Mac Voices. This edition of Mac Voices is supported by the MacVoices Slack, available to silver, gold, and platinum patrons of Mac Voices. Sign up today at patreon.com/MacVoices. Welcome to Mac Voices. This is a talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, in case you hadn't noticed, the last 2 years, the world has changed a little bit, and a lot of us are doing a lot more, well, a different kind of working might be a better way to say it. And so that's what we're going to focus on today, using a new tool for remote teamwork. And so from Remotion, I'm happy to welcome Alexander Embiricos. I think I got that right, Alex. Good to have you.
Yeah, that's right.
Co-founder of Remotion, and also an old friend back, one of the chief engineers there, Mr. Dan Wood. Ken, it's great to see you.
Hello.
I love these things where I get to meet new friends and old friends at the same time and to see cool new software. So I guess, Alex, I'll let you take over here. What is Remotion?
Cool. Hey, and so great to meet you, and thanks again for having us here. Remotion is what we think of as a virtual office. So one of the first things that you think about when you're building a team is what kind of environment do I want them to work in so that they can not only be productive together, but also build relationships with each other kind of just naturally, right? And at least before COVID, most teams, the answer to that was, well, we'll get an office, everyone will show up for a certain amount of time every day, and they'll just naturally work together and they'll naturally build relationships with each other. We started Remotion before COVID, and I'm happy to get into how or why that happened. But basically what we realized is that when you're working remotely, it's very good. We can be productive with our individual work. We can schedule good meetings, get things done. But one of the hardest things to do when you're working remotely is to build relationships with the rest of your team. And so we started thinking about, well, what's missing from the office that we don't have remotely? And we realized there were two things. Awareness of the rest of your team who's around, seeing them, making it easy to have short conversations, knowing when someone's free. And then the second thing was really lightweight ways to reach out that didn't require scheduling a meeting or starting in text and then upgrading. And so Remotion is basically those two things. It's a product that sits on your computer, gives you kind of a dock for your team on your Mac. And that dock shows you your teammates, who's around, and makes it really easy to reach out for either a short ad hoc conversation or just to hang out and virtually co-work. I'm happy to show it whenever it makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I want to get to that. A couple things here that I'm kind of intrigued by. So first of all, because of COVID, we're all familiar with a lot of these remote working, remote connection kind of solutions. Probably the one, for better or worse, the biggest dog in the fight is Microsoft Teams. But there's Slack, they're all over the place. And Remotion, what intrigued me is Remotion is different, and you'll see that in a minute, folks. But before we do that, you said that this was started before COVID. So what prompted you, with all the people, all the solutions that were already out there, what prompted you to get into this space?
Yeah, so sort of the shorter version of the story is I was working with my co-founder, Charlie, who got married 2 weeks ago. So congrats, Charlie.
Hey, congratulations.
Yeah, so we were working together and we'd known each other from college. And we both lived in San Francisco. And his partner had an opportunity to go to a great med school in Chicago. He wanted to move to support her and decided to move. And we started getting advice on whether or not it would make sense to co-found a company remotely. And all the advice we got was like, hey, in 2019, it can make sense to hire people, but co-founding remotely is a rare thing that makes sense. Like, generally don't do it. And so we started getting advice, well, okay, if we are going to work together remotely, like, how should we do it? And we started reading all the blog posts from, folks like GitLab, Zapier. You've probably read a lot of these blogs. And we realized that we just didn't really want to work in that way. Like, some of the lines that really stuck out to me when we were reading were lines like, like formalizing the informal, right? Or approaches like making everything async. And, Charlie and I were really people who we enjoy talking in an informal way without it being scheduled or planned. And we enjoy async work, but we also really enjoy just like talking and talking shop. And so we started realizing that the reason that many teams were not working remotely today was because they viewed that their culture wouldn't work remotely. Like Dropbox and Figma are two famous companies that said, like, we have in-office cultures. And so we realized, like, yeah, there are a lot of tools out there today that help some remote teams, but that's actually a small subset of teams. And all the other teams that are, missing out on the flexibility and advantages of remote work are missing out because they don't think remote works for their culture. Certain things are missing. And we realized, like, hey, we can build some of those things. And so although Charlie and I were not working on Remotion at the beginning, we were working at some other boring SaaS software. We started building Remotion on the side. Actually, funnily enough, neither of us were native macOS developers. But we started sort of scratching our heads around something. And, I was on a plane, and Xcode has excellent offline documentation. So I started a new project in Xcode for macOS and started sort of experimenting with this idea of like ambient awareness on macOS. And that experiment slowly built itself into the company that we have today. And now we get to work with awesome people like Dan who actually know what they're doing.
It's interesting to hear you discuss that evolution. I know I personally, these are my views, not necessarily the views of others, but the in-office, out-of-office, remote, in a kind of culture, the shortcomings of the solutions that are out there that seem to be so popular. And this one seems to fill a niche in at least one of those areas. And again, we'll see that in a minute. Dan, though, I want to shift over to you and find out exactly how you got involved. Did you just stumble across Alex and Charlie, or did they call you, or how did that work?
Yeah, actually, it was interesting. I think I first heard about them through the Angel List, which is a way, basically a job hunting board for startups. As it turned out, I actually knew someone who was one of the early members of Remotion, Matthew Tonkin, who I had known from Skitch way back in the days and Evernote and so on. So he was I think he was kind of my in to the team, and talking to him, it was really clear that this was going to be a fun company to join. And so that was, October of last year, I think, actually. I had been, training myself to transition over to iOS development and learning all kinds of Swift UI and that kind of thing, because it didn't seem like there was a lot of macOS native development out there. A lot of that culture had moved towards iOS development. And so I was a little surprised to find out that here's this company who's working on native Mac software. And of course, that's really where my heart and soul is. So it was great to be able to jump into that opportunity and do that. And actually that's partly related to the reason why we're here today and why we wrote this blog post talking about native macOS development, is that there's just not a lot, or I should say there's less native macOS development going on than I would hope in the world, and people in companies using other tools like Electron and Qt, and that's actually why I had left the previous company I was at. I was reading the writing on the wall, and they were going to be starting to move some of their stuff towards Qt as a cross-platform framework. And I just, it's just not where my heart is at. I really wanted to be building real, actual Apple Cocoa development, and so that was a great match, I think, when Remotion and I found each other.
That was something that caught my attention, because when Alex sent me the first email, he said specifically, this is not built in Electron, which referenced the MacVoices discussion we had a few weeks ago about Electron and how it seems to be, let's just say, not well received. That may be putting it mildly, in the programming community. And so now that makes sense, especially with you on board, Dan, that you would have a lot of the Mac chops to make it a Mac app and make it look and feel like a Mac app.
I mean, to put it mildly, Dan is our Mac chops at Remotion, so that's why we decided to work together. And we're desperately looking for the Dan to join us, and it's been great.
And there seems to be an old school whimsical element to this whole thing, because I look at your website and you have what most of us would consider the serious, informative titles, and then you have some titles that seem to be a little bit off the wall.
Yeah,
that's right. If you go to go ahead, Alex.
Okay, cool. I'll go, then you go. I'll keep it brief. Like basically, we're really trying to change how work feels, and that informs like everything we do, from why we're building natively to what we have on our site. On the topic of why we're building natively, a fun side story. Okay, this will be slightly longer, Dan, but it's going to be interesting. So like, I used to be a PM at Dropbox, a product manager there, and back when I started, we were relatively more native oriented. And the software we were building was really something that was unusual in that it was meant to run in the background, but still be incredibly useful for you. And over time, as we were evolving a company and we were trying to keep with the times and like hit goals and stuff, we started making our product more and more of a foreground product until somewhat, I don't know if you heard about this, but infamously, we launched this like Electron foreground experience that I don't think was the best received last year. But I saw a lot of those pressures of, starting with something that was really useful in the background and then pushing to go into the foreground. And I think if you're trying to build like a foreground experience that's like going to be used for 20 minutes, Electron or a web view can make a lot of sense. But when we were thinking about what we were trying to do, and we were thinking, we really want to change how work feels and change how it feels to have teammates, even though you're not in the same room. It was kind of similar in a way to some of the early things we did at Dropbox, and really got us thinking about, okay, this is why native would make sense for us. And on the topic of the website, it was actually a really fun branding exercise that we went through when we were trying to figure out like, how should we represent ourselves, and trying to be both fun and professional at the same time. And so that's what you see there.
And so that's why Alex is CEO and not allowed to write code anymore, because he should be doing CEO tasks and leave coding to the professionals. But yeah, it is interesting though, if you touch on the awareness that you get in the Mac doc, and I mean, we're also used to our Mac docs, and some people keep them hidden, some people keep them visible, but it's always there, and that it's just a really quick way to get access to what your apps are, and you could even see a little status that you can tell that you have unread mail or unread messages or something like that. Something's calling out to you, and being able to do that with people on your team it's really hard to describe if you haven't experienced it, but it's that same level of awareness that I think that's wonderful, that I can take a glance at any moment and kind of get a sense of who's in the office, who's talking to each other, who's offline. Maybe they're out for the day because of their time zone.
Is this a good time to screen share?
We should do a demo pretty soon.
Dan, keep talking. I'll just show it. I hope that's okay.
Sure. Let's get the screen showing working here, hopefully. There we go. Yeah, so what we're able to see here is that Alex at the top there on the side, and that we really did design it to look as much like the Mac doc as possible. He can hover over it and get a sense of some more details about each of these people. As you can see, not only do you see a photo of the person, a selfie, but it's actually, if you hover over it, we get it's actually a little moving loop. So it's kind of fun. That's one of the whimsical aspects that you mentioned, that we have not only on our webpage, but also the app itself.
So what I'm seeing is a representation of the people in your company. What are the indicators? I mean, help me understand, I guess, again, what I'm seeing. How the faded out folks at the bottom of the screen, I assume, are not online?
That's right. Hey, Dan, do you want to do the demo? You started it. Might as well continue. Okay. Let me share a different screen. Cool. Okay, I'm going to give you a quick demo of Remotion. And so the goals of Remotion are twofold. The first is to give you a degree of ambient awareness of your team. So for example, seeing like someone like Fernando is co-working with Sam right now, and Jim is offline because he's in England. So that's the first goal, presence and awareness. The second goal is making it really easy to reach out and talk to people. So if I wanted to talk to Dan right now, even though I know he's talking to us right now, I can hit invite to talk, and he can, let's say I have a quick question for him, and Dan can accept. And now we're actually having a really quick video call, like just inside in here. And when we're done with our quick thing, we can drop out. So those are the two things that Remotion does, but I'll talk a bit about like the approach here. The approach is thinking about the macOS doc and how it does a great job of giving you a sort of bird's eye view of what's going on and quick access to things. So we looked at this and we were really inspired by it. And actually, it's fun because since Dan joined, we've become more and more similar to the macOS doc. When we started, it was kind of a different thing. But we've really been trying to study the macOS doc and think about what makes it effective. So I'm going to go ahead and move this to the top so it's a little bigger. and we'll make it a bit bigger too, just so we can talk through it. And so, you have some of these same ideas, like you can mouse, this is me, you can mouse over things to get a quick label of them. And if you click on someone, you can pull them up. So something that Dan and I will often do in the morning, we'll see each other, and you can see that Dan has already received some emojis from the team, but I might say hello to Dan, and Dan might say hello back to me. Dan, you wanna say hello back? Cool. Dan and Harriet are both beekeepers, so we tend to have a lot of bees flying around in our docs. And so this is kind of the basic thing of like noticing that your teammate is coming online. Maybe you take a new selfie for the day. Like I take selfies at a coffee shop that I tend to work from, seeing who's in a meeting, who's doing what. It's very useful just to get into the flow of collaboration and feeling connected. The next thing that you can do is hop into rooms. So I don't want to disturb Sam and Fernando, but these two are in a room right now and they're actually listening to this music, this J. Cole track. And you can see that they're both muted, but they're just spending time together. And this is a super impactful activity for building your team because the friction of unmuting yourself is similar to the friction of reaching up in an office and just saying like, oh, hey, Dan, quick question for you. And so one of the things that, when we're building Remotion, where half of our time is spent thinking about the tool and the other half is spent thinking about what behaviors do team needs to be successful remotely, and co-working is one of them. So we can just demonstrate this. I'm going to click into a somewhat random room, which is the activate room. So I'm in here muted right now. And Dan, do you want to mute? Do you want to come in, sorry, as well? So Dan can just click into the room. And we could both be just sitting here muted, and we could use push to talk or click. And I'm not going to play music because you wouldn't be able to hear it, but we could just be sitting here muted, listening to music, unmuting ourselves when we have something to say. And if we want to get into a bigger, let's say we get into a big conversation, that we can actually pull out into a bigger view here. But most of the time, people who are using Remotion keep the dock just small on the side and, are doing a lot of calls with their camera off, maybe even muted and unmuting when necessary. So that's a quick overview. Sorry, I got a bit rambling there. But yeah, would love, do you have any questions? Anything you want me to click or show?
No, I'll just let you keep going. I'll save a couple questions I have in case you answer them along the way. Cool.
Well, maybe I'll actually stop there. I think, at the end of the day, Remotion is quite a simple product, and we try to do a small number of things well. And again, just showing you the status of your team and then making it easy to reach out to the team, especially in ways that aren't like your standard scheduled Zoom meeting about work, but that are more conducive to you talking about, Dan's bees or Dan's honey harvest this last weekend, et cetera.
That was a great demo. So I'm sending Alexander some fireworks because I thought that was a great demo.
Thanks, Dan.
Today's Mac Voices is supported by the MacVoices Slack. Available as a benefit to Silver, Gold, and Platinum patrons of Mac Voices. The MacVoices Slack is where you can connect with the members of the MacVoices Live panel and other MacVoices patrons. Get in on the discussions, agree or disagree with our opinions, and get your voice heard. Sign up at patreon.com/MacVoices. And thanks for supporting Mac Voices. Okay, so you ask about questions. So let me ask you some tough questions. And the first thing I'll ask is about a feature that I didn't see readily that may be there. If I'm working with Dan, is there a way that I can send him a quick copy of a file or file share, or is that just not part of the environment that you're trying to create?
Not at the moment. We're not starting there, although it's something that comes up and people do ask for. The way that we're looking at it right now is what's missing from work. And although, yes, it would be nice to be able to send files in Remotion, there are plenty of ways to send files to people right now. And so we say, hey, use one of those. If you use tools like Slack for your texting or your file sharing, use a tool like Slack. The thing that we really think is missing from work is the casual conversations, the conversations that you didn't schedule, but that you would have if you just walked into the office, someone saw you just arrived, so you clearly weren't focused yet and wanted to ask you a quick question or ask how your kids are doing. And so everything that we're building right now is just focused on like, hey, how can we help teams basically install an environment onto their computer that facilitates those casual conversations and fosters them basically. When we get that working very well, then there's like so many extensions that we would want to build on top of it, right? Like easy file sharing, maybe various forms of text sharing. I'm really excited about creating more forms of presence to reduce the number of notifications we have to get and just letting more things just happen ambiently. Like, hey, you notice something happened if you were there, and if you weren't there, then you don't notice it happen, and that's fine. So that's kind of our roadmap in a nutshell. And the answer is not yet, because it's not what we're focused on. Not the biggest problem.
Right. And again, these are the tough questions because somebody's going to ask them. So if you're not able to share files, is screen sharing an option at this point?
Yeah, we do have screen sharing or window sharing. It's really, really helpful. Yeah, we use it all the time.
Okay. Yeah, I would think that would be almost really more useful than necessarily file sharing, because you're right, there are plenty of ways to move files back and forth. But if I can just, let Alex see a quick draft of a letter or something, or Dan wants to show me a draft of code as if I'd understand it, you can do that. So
yeah, we see a lot of like really interesting patterns emerging with how folks use Remotion. So for example, one of the teams that has blogged about us, so I think I can mention them, which is Breeze. They will have some of the leaders on the team sit in a room for most of the day, just to be more available and foster even more collaboration and question asking and just bonding with the rest of the team. And then folks will come in to the room, and if, they'll just talk, maybe they'll just sit there, muted, as I mentioned, because no one wants to be missing out on the conversation when it does happen. And then they'll be screen sharing a bunch. And, we just, I think this morning, someone at Breeze was tweeting about how they think our screen sharing is snappier than Zoom's, which I'm so flattered by. Spending all day looking at the bugs, I'm like, okay, maybe sometimes and maybe not other times, but still great to hear. And yeah, screen sharing is one of the most commonly used things. I think I think it's like about 2/3 of folks who are doing calls in Remotion are also screen sharing every day.
Okay, the other question that you have to ask, because if anybody that's serious about business is going to use this tool or any tool, you have to ask about security. How secure are the conversations we're having? How secure is the video that if I happen to be sharing video, how secure is that? What have you done to address that issue?
Yeah, Dan, you want to take this, or should I take this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, cool.
Because really, my focus is the Mac UI is for the most part. So yeah. Yeah.
So there's two things that we talked about, right? There's the app itself, the core data infrastructure, and then there's the video calling infrastructure, which is kind of a separate piece. So on the core data side, we're built on Firebase, which is a Google service, and so we use Firebase for authentication, much safer than rolling your own authentication. A lot of companies will make mistakes there. We just trust Google there, and then we use all their best practices, and so your data is basically being authenticated and then secured by Google and transported by Google. On the video calling side, the biggest thing is that we don't record any of the calls, so all the bytes are just going over the network and then getting dropped. And we use a provider called Agora to do our video sharing, and Agora has all the best security practices put in place. Obviously, your calls are encrypted; they're subject to security audits, and a bunch of big companies use them as well.
Okay. I guess system usage, bandwidth, are any of these, is this just like using any other chat program from those standpoints?
I'll let Dan talk about
go for it. Yeah, in many ways, the fact that we're built as a native application really means that we can be slim as far as system usage goes. And so, whether it's the size of our download or just the overall payload of what needs to be, installed on your Mac, and the memory usage and CPU usage, that if you want to have something running on your Mac all day, you want something that's not going to be eating up resources, right? You want to be able to work at a cafe on a battery and not have this software that is not really doing much other than just showing you the presence of your team. You don't want that to be sucking up a lot of your CPU time. Obviously, there's some video, when you're actually on video, there is going to be a little more CPU usage, but we're able to keep that down to the bare minimum, I think, because we have the toolkit that's talking directly to all these Apple frameworks and not going through some sort of an intermediary like Electron would have to provide.
Yeah, we just did an audit actually, and we so on the RAM side, that's where you'll have one of the biggest differences versus native app. Like Electron apps, like 200, maybe 300 megabytes. We use more RAM when we're in calls, but most of the time when you're out of a call, we're using much less RAM than that. On the CPU side, when you're not in a call, Remotion is like basically tiny, like using nothing. And then when we are in a call, we are using somewhat similar CPU to Zoom, which is way less than anything in a browser like Google Meet. So we use like half of what Google Meet will do.
Okay.
And it's something that we work hard on, yeah.
Okay, so the other question, and I admit I have mixed feelings about this, because if let's take some of the other apps in this class. With Slack, you never know if I'm really there or not. There's nothing really evident. On the other hand, with Teams, yeah, I have something that indicates that I'm in Teams. I'm either marking myself busy or marking myself available or any of that. Obviously, here you can turn your presence on and off. And so this may be a technical question or maybe a culture question about how you encourage folks to use this, maybe within your own team, if you don't mind sharing that, or with others, because we're seeing more and more discussion of employer surveillance. And obviously, this is not a surveillance tool. This is a collaboration tool or an interaction tool. But there is that element of I'm online at 8 a.m. or I'm not online at 8 a.m. if I'm supposed to be. And so where do those questions, how are you addressing that, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I feel like you get to hear founders talk about their company culture all the time. So it might be more fun for Dan to take this and just share your point of view on that.
Wow,
I'm happy to go, but like it's boring, if talking about their company's culture.
It is an interesting. It's a good question though. It's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that's going on in Remotion that is happening without your choice. So as far as I choose to go online at a certain time of the day and go offline at a certain time. If I'm going to leave for a quick break, I actually have two choices. One, I could just walk over. I could walk away from my desk, and yeah, there's a possibility that someone might try to hit me up and call me at that moment when I'm not at the desk, and it'll say, "Oh, I missed a call." Or I could actually go offline and even say I'm offline for a short break or something like that. I'll usually do that at lunchtime. But you're also able to set not just the concept of online and offline, but also just what's your availability. And so you can say, hey, I'm focusing. Try not to bug me if you can help it, or I'm open to talk, or just a general kind of an online state. And then of course, just by going into a room, that's also indicating a different level of availability. So just if I'm going to be in the co-working room, then someone might expect that I'm going to be there, and they could chat with me really easily.
Our conversation with Alex and Dan continues in the next edition of MacVoices. We talk more about the specific features of Remotion. We talk about the inspiration behind Remotion and what it's trying to accomplish, and have a bit of a general discussion about the changing nature of work and how remote work fits into that. That's all next time on MacVoices. Until then, and as always, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching.